Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation Committee for the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. I'm calling this meeting to order at 10:01 a.m. Jessica, if you could please take care of the housekeeping items and let folks know how they can participate.
Yes, absolutely. So just a few reminders before we get started. In case you didn't hear, this meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on SACOG's website under the Agendas tab for board and committees. Additionally, all presentation slides are posted on the same webpage. For any members of the public tuning in today and who wish to make a public comment, you can notify us by selecting raise hand or by pressing *9 if you're calling in by phone. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes each. And for our committee members, please remain on mute until you're ready to speak, as this will help eliminate any background noise. And please remember to use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you're phoning in to alert the chair that you have a comment. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much. All right, next we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Joyner, would you mind leading us in the pledge today?
I'd be happy to. Will all please stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. Jessica, could you go ahead and take the roll, please?
Yes. Directors, please prepare to answer when I call your name. Director Bradford.
Here.
Director Branscombe.
Here.
Thank you. Desmond. Absent. Ledesma for Guerrero.
Here.
Jennings. Absent. Joyner.
Here.
Saylor.
Here.
Chenier. Absent. Vice Chair Sander. Absent. Vice Chair Spokley.
Here.
Vice Chair Soon.
Here.
And Sue Tucker for ex officio member Benapol. Absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to our public comment for items not on the agenda. If anyone from the public would like to speak on anything not on the agenda at this time, please raise your hand. And I'm looking at the attendees and I don't see any hands being raised. Do you see anything, Jessica?
No public comment.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to our next item, our consent calendar. We have a consent calendar in front of us, and if there's any comments on the consent calendar, I'll open to the public if there's any comments on this item. Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to our committee members if they're entertaining.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Okay,
Second,
Brad.
Okay, motion Vice Chair Spokley, seconded by Director Bradford. If we could do a roll call vote, please, Jessica.
Director Bradford.
Aye.
Branscombe.
Aye.
Desmond. Absent. Ledesma for Guerrero.
Aye.
Jennings. Absent. Joyner.
aye.
Saylor.
Aye.
Chenier. Absent. Vice Chair Sander. Absent. Vice Chair Spokley.
Yes.
Chair Soon.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All right. Thank you very much. And then we'll move on to next item. This is a report item back from November 18th. This is a committee report from Chair Gore's request. If you all remember from the Green Means Go item we had back then, Chair Gore asked for us to speak to our staff and see if we had any ideas about how to implement infill housing in the Green Means Go program. And so I'm gonna go ahead and open up to our committee members if there's anyone would like to offer any insights or comments you guys might have found speaking with your staff. Okay.
So Darren, I think what I would say for Lincoln is this is ongoing for us. We're working this all the time. We're looking at innovative ways to perhaps do land swaps, to more appropriately locate affordable housing projects on city-owned land that might otherwise be a poor location for that type of thing. We're incentivizing infill development throughout the historic downtown and taking a look at how we can, as we go through the revitalization process of that historic downtown, maybe create some opportunities for mixed use with new residential over existing commercial. So we're exploring it all the time. We've got a new city manager about to come on board in January, and we're discussing that with him and his new team as well.
Great. Thank you very much. It's good to hear. Director Saylor.
Thanks, Darren. I think this is I really appreciate Chair Gore asking us to do this, because it kind of causes us to put a little focus on a topic that we don't always talk about. And in our case, in Yolo County's case, we are a rural county when it looks at the unincorporated area, about 28,000 people in the unincorporated area scattered among a number of really small unincorporated towns and unnamed places. So we have a very little housing growth. Our RENA number, just to be clear about it, is 37, which is makes it all in scale and relative terms.
37, not 3,700, 37.
I said okay. 3 and a 7 right after it. That's okay. this, and this. So it's pretty small. But in Esparta, we've got a project coming along that has 78 housing units. 18 of those are going to be low and moderate. Our ordinance does require inclusionary, as an inclusionary requirement for any new project development. And this one has, of those 78, 8 will be low and 8 will be moderate. Our ordinance is silent on very low. And so that's an area that we are looking at a modification for, just so our ordinance is in place. But having an ordinance that has a requirement of 10% of 0 is 0. And so you need to have some additional pieces in place, not just an inclusionary housing ordinance. In our case, many of our areas are lacking in available infrastructure, so sewer, water systems. And so for us, we need to take a look at how do we fund the infrastructure in a way that makes projects pencil out. We're, for example, Knights Landing wells are consistently in danger of failing. The levees around them, around the city, that little town, an incorporated town, are antiquated and high risk for flood. So we've got to look at making the place safe before we can add any housing. While the county can, for a county, we can waive fees, we can absorb the cost that the fees are intended to address, but that doesn't by itself do what we need to do, because there are special districts for fire and cemetery and other kinds of uses that have their own assessments. And so there's a need for us to look at how do we fund some of the infrastructure investments that come along. I happen to have two incorporated cities in my district, Winters and Davis. And Winters has some very ambitious housing plans in place and some pending. And they are going to be coming up to some constraints on their wastewater system as well. And so I think we'll start having to have really serious conversations about infrastructure. Davis has for so long been a no growth community, at least by reputation, but in fact, it's not no growth. And in fact, the infill areas in Davis have really gone gangbusters in the last 10 years. And you can see that in the numbers. And an example project that I think is kind of worth looking at. There was a skilled nursing facility on Pole Line Road, about 3 acres. The place was no longer being used. It's been scraped off, and it's in the process of coming in as a 30-unit single family project that's being proposed. Right down the street from there, there was a children's residential facility that was removed and been replaced by a multifamily. I think it's 4 or 5 stories tall with several hundred units. And those are the examples of what's happening in that community. So I think it's a combination of looking at ways to finance infrastructure. Our YOLO housing group wants to do quite a bit of work, but it's going to take us finding alternatives to invest and ordinance and will. And so this question from Bonnie has caused us to start probing a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. Vice Chair Spokely.
Thank you, Chair Soon. I appreciate it. Hey, Jessica, is there any way I can share my screen with the committee?
Yes, you have that ability.
Oh, sorry. I should have looked before I asked.
That's okay. It's a valid question.
So the timing by Chair Gore was absolutely impeccable from our perspective. We just at our last city council meeting had a presentation from our brand new economic and planning manager that we hired in Auburn to kind of kickstart our efforts to update our code, zoning code in particular. It's I won't say how old it is, but it's out of date. Hasn't been looked at for decades, and we're kicking off or putting out an RFP to kind of get the process started. But the city council goals are just what we've been talking about, Don, what you were just talking about. It's to encourage the infill development, maximize our ability to build. We have a couple of unique business districts. Our downtown business district has some mixed use that's there, but we had a situation a couple of years ago where a young entrepreneur wanted to rehab the apartment space that was above his business right in our downtown district, and our zoning code wouldn't allow him to do that.
Mm.
It was an existing non-conforming use, and because we have such an antiquated zoning code, we had to really struggle to figure out how to work around the code to make it work for this individual, and that's ridiculous. So this process that we just kicked off at our last city council meeting is, it's going to give us the tools that we need to be able to answer the questions when people come into town wanting to open a business or remodel an upstairs space for an apartment or a couple of apartments. It's going to give us the tools to allow folks to do that. The other point that comes up all the time when we talk about infill redevelopment is, and I'm sure it's consistent for many other jurisdictions, but it always boils down to a lengthy conversation about parking. And we had another entrepreneur who was doing great projects in town. He wanted to buy an old building and remodel it and create, I think it was like 7 or 8 studio apartments. He had no parking on site, so it would have been a zero parking kind of thing. They would have utilized on-street parking or off-site parking, and the neighbors came out in force, just outraged that the council would consider, the planning commission would consider a project without requiring parking. I had a funny conversation with a woman who lived on the street right next to the business district where this guy, this gentleman wanted to do the project. And she told me, well, I've got a car, my son has a car, I've got my boat in my driveway, and there's no room for anybody else to park on our street. And it's like, lady, you've got a boat in your driveway, you've got 2 cars in the street, you're part of the problem. I mean, clean out your garage and put your cars in your garage. Anyway, the conversation about the reduced parking requirements, I think, is kind of fundamental for us. It will be fundamental for us. I think it's a key component of, infill development, and it's got to be part of kind of a mindset change for folks. There's actually, as much as we hear in our community about how there's not enough parking, you drive by any one of our off-site parking lots that the city owns, and 9 times out of 10, they're half full. It's not that people don't know where they are, because we talk about them all the time. We've got big signs saying where they're at. Maybe the signage could be better. It's about people want to park right in front of their house, right in front of their store, right in front of their whatever, and not really walk. We're trying to change that. We need to try to continue on those efforts to change that. It's okay to get out and walk a little bit to get to your apartment, or get to your studio, or get to your business. But again, Chair Gore was foreseeing this item, because I think our meeting was before. I don't know, maybe it was good timing. But I'm super excited about this opportunity. It's going to take a little while, but it's going to be a great process for our city, our community. And as you can see here, these were some of the fundamental goals that we kind of set forth with our new city manager that's been on board now for a year and a half, is to jump into this with both feet and let's get it figured out. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Spokley. For us in Elk Grove, well, first I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, Don and Matt. I'd also appreciate Chair Gore's highlighting this and enabling us to all share, because I'm sure all our staff and all of us at our respective agencies are doing everything we can, and it's kind of neat to but we don't always get a chance to talk about what the strategies we're employing. So this is a great opportunity for us to try to learn from one another. For us in Elk Grove, we're doing similar things. Coincidentally, we did reduce parking requirements at a market rate infill project, something that I personally have a lot of experience with, because these vacant lands were sitting vacant for 20 years, right? I mean, it's just a block away from my house, and to see it now going forward is a great milestone, but also reminds me of the challenges that we face to try to incentivize infill housing. This is a market rate project that we approved earlier this year, and what we saw was definitely the rents had increased to enable that, but obviously us reducing their parking requirements so they could get more units in there was helpful to them. Coincidentally, we have several infill projects that are happening within the city, all of them affordable for affordable perspective. And so some of the things that we do in the city is we charge market rate developers an affordable housing fee that goes into an affordable fund that then we lend out to affordable builders as gap financing. So as they pursue tax credits and bond financing, they're able to use these affordable funds as part of their gap financing, and then go after the other funds. So that's been a successful model for us. Also recently, we are approved to enter into negotiations with because I myself and Councilmember Hume serve on the Affordable Housing Committee. We approved advancing negotiations for a church project. So that's something that we noticed was a portion of church land is being used for affordable housing. And that's something our affordable housing manager, Sarah Bontrager, has recognized, that churches can be underutilized properties. And so that maybe that's something that, as a region, it might be worth looking at. We're trying to encourage or incentivize, people to, use housing vouchers for, to encourage them to be more open to those things. So those are just a few of the things that we're trying to do in our city. But I've always been very excited about the affordable housing fee model as opposed to the inclusionary portion. That's something that I've looked at or worked with professionally. the inclusionary model was very difficult to actually implement, because often they're different builders, and so trying to well, anyway, I won't go into the details here, but I just found a lot of challenges with that personally. And at least from our city perspective, this affordable fee that is charged to market rate developers seems to work pretty well. Are there any other committee members that'd like to offer up what they've been doing to encourage? Oh, I see somebody's hand went up here. Let's see. It's not showing up. I see a panelist hand up, but I don't know why. I'm not.
Hey, Chair, it's Chris.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Sorry. Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
How are you? And I appreciate again the board and Chair Gore's bringing up of this issue, and was frankly because I wasn't at the normal board meeting, was unaware of sort of the challenge she laid out, but certainly a great conversation. And I know recently our city manager was part of a panel discussion on Green Means Go, and outlined a lot of the work that we've been doing in West Sacramento. So not to be repetitive of that, but certainly it's something in my 11 years on council has been a point of pride for us as we've worked towards looking at our infill housing, looking at affordable housing in a much more opportunistic way, right? So, and our work is not done by any means. I think Aaron I watched part of it, but hopefully Aaron laid out for all of you the path we're on, and we're continuing to look at how we can further the notion of the infill development piece, and certainly looking at our fee structure is the most current endeavor we're looking at in terms of our ability to ensure that I think as a council, we all understand the cost of doing infill housing is much higher than it is on suburban development, which will have that too. And so we're looking at ways, our staff has been working earnestly in ways to align our fee structure to recognize that and to encourage more housing along our riverfront and in our other infill areas. So again, this is an area where I really appreciate SACOG's work and the rest of the board hearing what you're all doing. I know I'm trying not to retread our path that we've laid out for you already, but I do want to ensure that to SACOG and our board members that this continues to be our focus. We are zeroed in on this issue. To me, there's nothing more important, which is why I'm happy to be a part of this transportation committee, because we also got to look to most of our infill area in the transit district or in the Broderick, Washington, and the Bridge District area is cared for already underparked. It's been planned with a reduction in parking, and so our challenge has been is we had to go find the transit needs to meet it, which is why we've been so doggedly pursuing the streetcar light rail connections as well as our other mobility options, because the whole Bridge District has been planned to be underparked. And trust me, as that I forgot who brought up their story about parking challenges with residents and developers. I've had my share with at least one who's doing most of the work on the riverfront. That we need to keep our parking standards the same, and that's just an absolute necessity. So anyway, just want to pass along our commitment to this, and I'll continue to work and focus on this. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Director Bradford. Director Bradford, did you have your hand up?
The things that we were doing and encourage them to watch the video of the
Am I freezing, or is that
Director Bradford is freezing?
okay? Can you hear us, Director Bradford?
Director Bradford, can I make a suggestion that you turn your video off, and that might help your audio?
It's having problems.
Oh. If you're speaking, Director Bradford, we can't hear you.
If only there were an infrastructure bill with some broadband funding, we could just, make it
Right.
better.
Yeah,
Chair,
I'll see what we can do about that.
do you mind if I just wrap this up real quick, unless Director,
Yeah.
Sander, and you had a comment
I-
there?
That's what I was wondering. I was going to go to Director Sander if you wanted to say something. I saw you trying to. Did you want to say something, Director Sander?
Sure, I can add something here. In Rancho Cordova, we've got pretty substantial infill opportunities. I'll put it that way, as opposed to challenges. We focused in a lot over the past 15 years on how do you stimulate development along a corridor like Folsom Boulevard. And there are a lot of challenges. Those being, how much is real estate worth nearby? So how much rent can you expect? Most pro formas will fail sort of just on that initial aspect.
Mhm.
And that'll be the end of the discussion. So we've seen public investment go on, and we've seen very, very limited private investment follow. And we are now trying a different form of public investment, which is directly subsidizing or supporting the creation of housing in conjunction with a larger project in Rancho Cordova, with the hope that, like in another part of town, we can stimulate a housing effort, an investment effort that will carry on down the boulevard. We had a very interesting experience with infill in our giant business park, where we had planned in the Capitol Village neighborhood. I think many of you may be familiar with that. It's sort of a nationally award-winning infill development. But the last component of that plan was multifamily housing. And so by the time the developer got around to finding someone who was interested in building that, and they were proposing a real kind of extreme luxury environment, the entire neighborhood of all the other infill housing that had been put there showed up in opposition. I mean, it was pretty much 100% opposition, a couple thousand residents. And we still, bravely as a council 5-0 passed that, nope, this is always the plan, we're going ahead with it. And since then, the rents that have been available in that infill development in the middle of our business park have broken all those models that said you can't do this in Rancho Cordova. So much so that we had some other developers come to City Hall, actually schedule a meeting with me and the economic development director, and said, okay, who's lying? Is it the city putting this data out, or is it your apartment owner group? Because it's impossible. You can't be getting these rents. My model won't account for it. A pretty amusing meeting, I got to tell you. We're hoping something similar like that can happen elsewhere in Rancho Cordova on these infill corridors. That previous story I just told you has sparked additional interest in putting infill on unused parking lots in our business park area. So we're excited by that, and trying to urbanize in the healthiest way that area. Those are all infill projects as well. But the more challenging one on those old commercial corridors, we're hoping to repeat this, but it's not an easy lift. It's a really big lift. And so I'm thankful for SACOG for continuing this discussion. We spent a year looking at commercial corridors. I guess it's been a year and a half ago now, and thinking about ways to stimulate this sort of development. And I think this is the natural follow-on to that. What are we all doing about it? Where are we finding success, and where can we learn from each other? So thank you for continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sander. Before I go back to James, Dr. Bradford, are you have any further luck with your technology there?
Can you hear me okay now, or is it still pretty tough?
No, we can hear you now. Great.
Okay, I just wanted to mention a couple of the things that we've done in Yuba County. I had a chance to talk to our head of planning, and we have changed parking requirements so that it's one offsite parking spot per unit in Yuba County, and we're doing some zoning changes to zone more areas to support multifamily. And then in addition to that, I know one of the things I mentioned at the last workshop was trying to have impact fees that are square foot based as opposed to unit based. And the county impact fees are square foot based in Yuba County. Although, as mentioned, we have, as most of our development is in unincorporated areas, we do have all the special districts, and their impact fees, may or may not be tied to that. So that's certainly something we can work on, is working with the special districts to try to get to an impact fee that doesn't de-incentivize smaller units. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you. That's a great point. I'd forgotten to mention that. That is something we're looking at as well, these per square foot impact fees. James, if you don't mind, I just want to open up for the public real quick to see if there's any comments. Does anyone from the public, after hearing these comments, would like to add their own input for that opportunity now? And not seeing any hands go up, I'm going to go ahead and bring it back. James, did you want to close out this item?
Just a couple of things, Chair, soon. Really appreciated people jumping in on that. It was great. Those were great updates, by the way. Two things. One is, if you remember, the board was entertaining a position on AB 1401, which was a state bill that would have basically prohibited you at the local level from having any parking minimums around transit corridors. You did not want to take a position on that bill or support it, because you didn't want the state telling you to do this, you want to do it yourselves. So here we are saying, hey, we're ready to help you, right? We are ready to help do this bottom up. But as Director Spokley, I've heard that story before on parking. It's not easy, right? If these things were easy, you might have already done them. Mm-hmm. So don't be shy, and understand, even as the Transportation Committee, that we've got a lot of resources and we are here to help, because I think the things that Director Spokley mentioned, I have it in my own neighborhood where I live. The fear of parking and the lack of parking, frankly, it's suppressing development. It's suppressing housing opportunities and multifamily housing opportunities, requiring, rather than letting the market decide how much parking to provide. I'm not saying it's as simple as that, but we're here to help you, number one. And two, my heart is warmed, because sometimes I worry when we have a transportation committee that just talks transportation, we're forgetting about some of the upstream problems that are created by inefficient land use, right? By not following the blueprint, by not pursuing some of these things that cause some of our transportation problems to begin with. And so I think this is an excellent example of, and I know you all know this, but how important land use is, which is also in terms of solving our transportation problems. Because if we only think transportation and we don't think jobs, housing, retail, phasing of growth, we're forever going to have a transportation problem that we'll never be able to dig ourselves out of. And so that is my final plug for all of you to come to the lunch at noon and hear about the blueprint. Veterans, you can refresh yourselves or add to that discussion, but we have our Deputy Executive Director, Casey Lazan, going over the blueprint at noon in the small, informal way. And that's that for me. So thank you all.
Thanks, James. You and your team have trained us well. So we're speaking in multilingual housing, jobs, and transportation. So, all right, I hope everybody can join at noon. We'll move on to the next item, which is our action items. And item 4, authorizing the amendments to Community Design Grant Memorandum of Understanding with City of Winters. Greg Chu, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning to you. Greg Chu on the planning staff for SACOG, and today a request from the City of Winters. They received in 2018 a $100,000 grant through the Community Design Program. That program is intended to help promote the blueprint, and jurisdictions that request the non-competitive $100,000 grants are allowed to use the grants towards anything, planning, public outreach, anything that will help promote any of the blueprint principles. The city in 2018 requested it to help support some general plan activities and support, and as well as in some environmental analysis. Since then, some priorities changed at the city, and staff has changed. And they have 3 years in the grant program to use the funds. They can come back to the SACOG board and ask for a one-time 12-month extension. So with that, they are doing that, as well as asking to change the scope of work. Instead of for working on the general plan, is to use it specifically for a park, vacant land to create some park space in their downtown, and to help activate more their downtown alleyways activation program. So with that, this is a administrative request that's required if they are to receive the 12-month extension and the change scope of work. This is a relatively routine thing. In September, 4 local jurisdictions had done the same thing that were approved by the SACOG board. So with that, it goes before this committee.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions from our committee members? I see a question from Director Saylor. Go ahead.
I simply want to move for approval.
Okay, great. Hold on to that, Don. Let me just go open up to the public. If there's any comments from folks in the public wishing to speak on this. Okay, seeing none, bring it back. Got a motion from Director Saylor.
I'll second that. I may have been the cause of this extension, so I'll go ahead and second it.
Okay, seconded by Vice Chair Spokley. Could we do a roll call vote, Jessica? Seeing there's no other comments from our committee members. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, and I want to use this opportunity to welcome Sue Tacker. She's joined us, so I'll let the record show that she's present here today.
Good morning, Sue.
Director Bradford?
Aye.
Thank you. Branscombe?
Aye.
Desmond? Absent. Ledesma for Guerrero?
Aye.
Jennings? Absent. Joyner?
Aye.
Saylor?
Aye.
Chenier? Absent. Vice Chair Sander?
Aye.
Vice Chair Spokley?
Yes.
And Chair Soon.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll go to next item 5, the 2022 Regional Transportation Improvement Program adoption. Jose, I always mess up your last name. Could you please pronounce it for me?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So starting with my first name, I have a double first name. It is Jose Luis, and the last name is, in Spanish, it's Caceres, but in English, I don't know, Caceres, it's fine.
Caceres. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the introduction. We only talk about the RTIP once every 2 years, and I do not expect many people to know what this acronym is. I'm going to give a brief background on the acronym that is the RTIP. I'm going to talk a little bit about that last funding round we had, how we do delivery, and then I'm going to go over this item, talking about kind of briefly what it is on a summary, and then we'll dig down into a few examples so that the committee understands the action before it. And the action before it, I always think it's good to remind, we're asking, staff is requesting that the Transportation Committee recommend that the board approve by resolution the 2022 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. So the RTIP, I actually never use this acronym RTIP. It is the regional component to the statewide document, which is called the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Program. And I think many here have heard of the STIP. The STIP, though, man, it's another one of those acronyms that has the word TIP or the initials TIP in it. The STIP is like our MTIP, our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, which I believe this committee hears about more often. It is all of the region's proposals for how to spend their regional, state, and federal funding combined into one mega document called the STIP. And when I say region, this is SACOG's other role. We are an MPO for the 6 counties, but we're also an RTPA, a Regional Transportation Planning Agency, state designation for just the 4 counties, Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, Yuba. Placer and El Dorado, PCTPA and EDCTC are bringing very similar items to their respective boards for their own one county RTIPs. So we have to do this every 2 years. I think of it as an administrative document. That means it can change. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is how we tell the public our plans for how to spend the state's dollars. That is the RTIP. Well, it doesn't help that we also talk about it like it's a fund type. So we will say STIP funds or RTIP funds. So it's a document and a fund type. Like there is no CMAQ document, but there's a CMAQ fund type. So that's the RTIP, that's the STIP. We are proposing to the CTC this kind of biannual update where we add new projects, make changes to existing projects, and hope that they will approve it. So another bit of background is we had our funding round, our 2021 funding round, and the Transportation Committee and Board directed staff to go program and deliver those projects. We had multiple fund types that our board was programming: congestion mitigation or quality, regional surface transportation program, and STIP, which is also RIP, the RTIP. The CMAQ and RSTP, we have delegated authority from the board. We got most of those funds all programmed to projects via administrative modifications that we've been making to the federal Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, the MTIP. We don't have that kind of delegated authority for the board for the STIP. We have to take this big kind of formal document back through our board a second time. Well, I guess a first time. Now, something that you may have just caught on there is the board doesn't specifically cherry pick which fund to put to which project in the funding round. Instead, direct staff, do your best, try to find the best fit for the funds and the projects. And we do, and it can be challenging, especially when the CTC told us, hey, we don't have a very good STIP for you this year. They told us there's no new funding in the upcoming 3 years. All the new funding is in the 4th and 5th year, that's really far out. Where was I? So our funding round, we weren't picking projects that far out. We were picking projects that are pretty ready to go. And we're putting many of them into the STIP, but not all of them. You're not going to see all of our funding round projects in this item. Finally, I was talking about how we pool funds. We also pool our own STIP funds. See, the CTC, the California Transportation Commission, thinks of RTPAs as kind of agglomerations of counties. So we have Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, Yuba, and they give us shares that belong to each of those counties, and they expect us to spend those funds within those counties, or at least that's kind of what some other parts of California do. We pool all of our CMAQ, all of our RSTP, all of our STIP to deliver the best projects with the most appropriate fund type. So what you'll see in this item is we have county shares that belong to Sutter and Yolo and Yuba that we're putting like Sacramento projects in there, or I think we're even putting a Yolo project in a Yuba share. We are not making any mistakes. This is not a typo. This is how we have to give it to the California Transportation Commission so they can see that we're using all of our shares. The reason those shares are kind of big is one of the big ones is we bought out a $17 million 5th Street Bridge in Yuba City that was taking up, I think, some Sutter and Yuba shares. We've delivered with RSTP. So that's the background. Let's go into the changes. So I'm going to do a screen share and pull up that summary document that I gave as a handout. Let me pull it up. It is right here. All right. Now I'm going to move some windows around. I'm going to highlight a few projects, but before I do this, sorry, I'm getting used to the Zoom. Your pictures are over there. All right. There's 3 main ways of describing the changes. We're making changes to existing STIP projects. You see the STIP is an existing document where we're adding 2 more years to it. So there's some existing projects that are changing. We are programming new or increased funding from the 2021 funding round. And we're also making changes based on fund consolidation agreements. Oh, I forgot to explain fund consolidation agreements. Right after the 2021 funding round, SACOG staff, we approached every single agency that we could, and we asked them, hey, instead of delivering 5 or 4 projects, all with federal funds, what if you consolidated those federal funds onto fewer projects, like 2 or 3, and you did the other 2 with local dollars? In many cases, we heard, yes, please, thank you. We would rather do that than do multiple federal projects. When an agency like the city of Elk Grove and Sacramento County, when they deliver a project with 100% local dollars, they save 20% on the cost of the project, and they can deliver it at least a year faster. So you're going to see changes in here that reflect fund consolidations that staff has executed with cities and counties. So I'll jump into the first example. First example is down here. It's San Juan Complete Street. Oh, just passed. This is the city of Citrus Heights San Juan Complete Streets. Up here is the way it looks currently in the STIP. It has 1.6 million and change in state fiscal year 23-24. Their project is coming up and their schedule is quite real. They believe they can deliver a year earlier. And we believe that we have the flexibility of the CTC to ask for it a year earlier within these first 3 years of the CTC of the STIP. Second example of changes here would be adding funding from the regional funding round. So Alberta, jump back up here. Alberta is a project that had 5 million from a past funding round. From this recent funding round, the board awarded it $5 million more. We're putting it onto this existing project, so it goes from 5 million to 10 million. The schedule 23-24 still looks like a good fit. Third example is Kemmer. This one's a little more complicated. I saved the more complicated one for the end. The city of Elk Grove worked with SACOG to come up with a multi-project fund consolidation. And this project also received funding from our 2021 funding round. So up here, it existed or exists currently now with 4.9 million in the STIP. We're adding 5 million plus another 3.5 or 3.4 million from a fund consolidation. Now, I'm expecting some questions, so I'm going to just say a few things. SACOG is never giving out any more money than the board programmed. We're moving funding between projects. And we're doing all this in close cooperation with the cities, with the project sponsors who love this. We're helping to get projects faster and cheaper. And this document it's an administrative document. What we're asking the Transportation Committee to recommend, this document will or may likely change. We're going to send it to the CTC and they may push back. They may not like all of the funds in the first 3 years. They've told us they told us to only put all funds in the last 2 years, but they told us that before the passage of the IIJA, the new infrastructure act. We think we have a case for putting funds in the first 3 years. So that's the presentation. That's our background. That's the analysis. I'll take questions now and I'll stop the screen share.
Thanks, Jose Luis. Complicated for sure, but you do a great job explaining it. Are there any questions from our committee members? Oh, Director Saylor, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I second your observation. I think Jose Luis does an exceptional job with this very complex material and makes it understandable for us those times that it comes before us. So thank you. I have an interest in some further conversation on the YOLO Road 98 project. I won't bore the entire committee, but I'd like to talk with staff between now and the board meeting about the timing of that project and whether there's a possibility of reflecting it in the RTIP in at least 1 year and forward from where it's shown currently. And so I'd like to have that opportunity.
Absolutely, we'll do, Director Saylor.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna open up to the public. If any members of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the chat function now. And seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to our committee members. Any further comments, or I'll entertain a motion?
I move that we move this forward to the board.
Okay.
Director Bradford will second.
All right. Motion by Director Saylor, seconded by Director Bradford. Jessica, if we could do a roll call vote, please.
Director Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Aye.
Desmond, absent. Ledesma for Guerrero,
Aye.
Jennings, absent. Joyner,
Aye.
Saylor,
Aye.
Chenier, absent. Vice Chair Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Spokely,
Yes.
and Chair Soon.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, on to item 6, release of the draft regional trail network for the Sacramento Region Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan. Victoria Cacciatore, good morning.
Good morning. And as you noted, Victoria Cacciatore of the of SACOG staff, and I'm the project manager for the Sacramento Region Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan. I'm going to turn my camera off so as to not test the limits of my internet connection. I would rather you see the slides than my freezing screen. So with that. So the regional trails, oh, actually first, is everybody able to see the screen?
Yes.
Great. Our regional trail or Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan is our collaborative effort to envision a dynamic system of interconnected trails and parks across El Dorado, Placer, Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba counties. And I'm here today to request your recommendation to the board to release the draft regional trail network. We want to share the in-progress network with a wider audience of partners to ensure that we're meeting the goals of the network and also identifying the network that will best meet the needs of our region's residents. So this is a familiar slide, or at minimum familiar content for you. At the onset of this plan in late 2019, early 2020, SACOG staff analyzed close to 80 local plans, and through those plans, whether you're to the east of the region, or to the west, to the north, or the south, there were 6 goals that rose to the top from all of your general plans, your bicycle transportation plans, your parks and trails master plans. These 6 goals are part of our common foundational vision for what our regional trail network could, perhaps even should, pursue as far as goals. And if there's one thing that we have learned through this, it's that there are many different ways throughout our region that people use to identify progress towards these goals. So we've worked with local staff, we've used the input from the survey from earlier this year, and we've worked with our community partners and also local staff to develop the performance metrics that help focus our interpretation of what it means to have a trail network. Excuse me, what it means to have a trail network that is supporting environmental justice, or a trail network that is supporting economic vitality. If you will reference the attachment with the staff report that shows the performance measures that you reviewed in June of how we would define progress towards these goals. It's also important to note that in our work with our partners, they identified the goals of environmental justice, health, and economic vitality as holding the strongest potential to help us create a regionally beneficial trail network that both serves the needs of residents and also helps us recover from pandemic impacts. So noting that those have been the top 3 highlighted goals, I wanted to go a little bit into what it means to improve health with trails. So what you have here is a graphic that shows how public health folks look at the different things that impact public health. We know that when we're trying to apply this to a regional trail network, we have a lot of studies and research on trail networks throughout the United States that show how proximity to a trail increases the likelihood that you will use the trail. And our Envision network uses that information to identify how a trail network can support healthy lifestyles by making healthy choice the easy choice. So what I have highlighted is that we're looking to change the context. When you're looking at a public health discussion, changing the context could be something like tobacco taxation or laws prohibiting smoking in public places. But for us, we're looking to increase the percentage of people living close to that trail. So increasing the number of people living within a half mile of a connected trail from 41%, which was what our baseline analysis was, to 61%. As part of when we were looking at how many people have access to these longer trails, we used a base measurement of a half-mile trail because that is roughly a 10-minute walk. We saw that our region is unfortunately not different from what you see throughout the rest of the state, where people in lower income neighborhoods are less likely to have access to that connecting trail, that trail that's a half mile or longer that you might be able to use for transportation purposes, or at minimum to go for a walk that is longer than 5 minutes. And what this, while overall the access to longer trails is not great throughout the region, what we saw is that there's a 30% gap between whether you're in that lower income neighborhood or whether you are not in that lower income neighborhood. When you couple that with the travel data that we have from our Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Communities Strategy that shows that people living in our environmental justice communities are more likely to bike, to walk, to take transit than people in other communities. Our region's inequitable trail access also means that our lower income residents do not have the low stress, high comfort, safer access that is provided by connecting trails. And so what we're looking at is to reduce or actually eliminate that disparity in access. So it shouldn't matter whether you're in a lower income neighborhood or not, you should still have access to that high comfort, safer trail. And lastly, a message that we really heard loud and clear from all of the partners that we worked with: the presence of a trail is not enough. It needs to provide access to something that you want to go to. And through our survey earlier this year, we saw that people were not focused on having trail access to work or school. And there's a host of reasons that we discussed that might be at the base of that, such as the uncertainty around when people would return to the office, whether that was even a high priority for them, the many different factors that go into a parent's decision of whether or not they feel okay with their kid walking to school. However, there was a really strong interest in using trails to get to places where people could experience their communities with family, friends, and neighbors. So we coupled that preference from the survey data on where people would want to go and what values that represent with the visions from your local plans, the input from local agency staff and community partners to identify the important ways in which regional trail network could support economic vitality in a way that is meaningful for residents. And so when you are looking at the draft network before you, there's a sample of the community enhancing destinations that we heard about from our conversations with local partners, some of the information from survey data, and then also from community organizations that were sharing what these enhancing destinations are. And you'll see that they're broken into two different groups. There's social gathering places. So some of the downtowns that people are talking about earlier, other places that are really unique to our region as far as the sense of place that they provide, and then also creating connecting trail access to the geographic features that make our region unique: the rivers, the bodies of water, mountains, and open spaces. So in this draft regional trail network, we have 4 broad connections slash areas. We have the most concrete examples, which are what we have in the regional trails network. These are existing and planned trails that are all sourced from your local planning documents, bicycle transportation plans, parks and trails master plans, some specific plans. And in that grouping of existing and planned trails that are from locally approved documents or things that you've already built, we have 654 miles of paved, what Caltrans would refer to as class 1 trails. And then it also includes what we have identified as informal trails that may have different widths or surface types, that don't necessarily meet the Caltrans design specifications, but they are best suited to the community needs and the context in which the trail is going. We also have 1,200 miles of planned trails in the regional trail network, again, sourced from your local planning documents. So that is the first category. And we also have what we've been calling trail study corridors. This is work that is in progress at the local level. It may not be included in a plan at this point in time, but it's something that the local agency, the city or county has shared that they're interested in working on, or they are in progress with working on them. Sometimes they're also challenging trails that are in existing planning documents, but need some more questions answered before you can fully commit to saying that it's definitely viable. And we have 95 miles of these trail study corridors in the network. And even with all of those miles of the existing trails, planned trails, and trail study corridors that are aligned with local planning efforts, there are still gaps in our network, and we fall short of our goal to connect communities across all 6 counties by trail. So you have 69 miles of potential connecting corridors that are the areas that SACOG has identified of there may be something here that we can pursue. We're looking to the board to release a public draft so we can work with a wider swath of partners on this. And then there's lastly, the areas that need more study where there's you can't even draw a large fuzzy line on the map. There's not a clear winning option or most likely to succeed option. And so just more work is needed. That is what we have in the draft trail network today. And what we're working towards is to removing those last 2 boxes of the areas that need more study and the SACOG identified potential connecting corridors, and to focus entirely on what is achievable through both a regional lens and also a local lens. So leaning on what's in the locally adopted existing and planned trails, and then also the local identified trail study corridors. And so for today, I am requesting that you recommend to the board the release of the draft regional trail network so we can work with that wider band of partners to ensure that our regional trail network is achieving the goals that we set out to achieve. When I say that we want to work with a wider audience of partners, most of the work to this point in identifying exact trail alignments has been focused with local agency staff. We recognize that it's a very sensitive subject to put lines on a map. It can either raise hopes for projects that may or may not be feasible, even on a longer time frame, and it can also create other complications in this, but we want to open up the discussion to a wider audience of partners and share this more broadly. And also to check our progress against the performance metrics that we identified for the network, again, referencing the attachment. And our anticipated schedule, assuming that the SACOG board moves to release this for that broader input, is that we would work on the draft network through February 1st and then bring a final network back to you in March for adoption. And with that, I'll take any questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Victoria. I know you've been working a lot with all of our staff, so really appreciate all your work and your team's work on all this. I think this is the concept is a great amenity for this region, the entire SACOG region. So hope we can keep this moving forward. Are there any questions from our directors? this time.
I've got a comment.
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead, Director
you
Sanders.
know, we may have mentioned this before, Mr. Chair, but you know, one thing that strikes me in this is that no one's in charge. You know, we're all in charge of our local jurisdictions and our trails, but we've got very few people and perhaps no organizations other than SACOG at this point that actually thinks about what that regional network looks like. And I think that is that's a potential risk. And I'll use my favorite example. You know, Rancho Cordova is the origin and destination of the most trips in the region other than downtown Sacramento. So it's our jobs base most likely that causes that stat to be true. We just saw it in a report recently at SACOG. And we're putting in a lot of bicycle infrastructure that will make our city more connected to the great trail that runs along the American River Parkway. But getting to us on the American River Parkway from some places is harder than you might expect. One of which is Carmichael and Fair Oaks, those neighborhoods immediately north of us across the river. There's no trail infrastructure really on the north side of the river, and extensive on the south side with our jobs base there. So the idea of putting a bridge across that river for pedestrian and cycle use would make a lot of sense in terms of catchment areas. But no one is really putting that on the plan because it spans two jurisdictions. So some agency, some metrics have to be applied from somewhere that can sort of identify a project like that. I'm making the case that that one might pencil out, perhaps it doesn't, but there would be others like this that would pencil out in terms of the number of users who could potentially use it. And in our case, then have an alternative means of getting to their job. So I'm kind of interested in hearing from James or from other staff, you know, how do you see this effort rolling out? You know, as do you expect, do you hope that all of our jurisdictions sort of sign on to this plan? Is that the ultimate goal?
That's an excellent question, Director Sander. Victoria, I hope you don't mind if I'll offer some thoughts. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I myself, as you know, I'm really bullish on this idea because of what I've seen other metropolitan regions, urban, suburban, and rural do across the country. And I think we ought to be the cycling and walking and trail capital of North America, as far as I'm concerned. And we've got some work to do, right? But I think what has been so fascinating, among other things, is number one, as you said so well, Director Sander, nobody kind of owns this. So everybody sort of feels like, well, I've got my segment, but it just sort of stops and starts. And I'm not sure, I think that other segment over there is a special district, or why don't you get in touch with this agency, right? And that's your staff and Victoria. They've done so much work to try to knit this thing together. The other thing that and this is a metaphor in more ways than one, but we really don't want this to be the SACOG, we're going to draw the lines on the map because we know best, right? This has to be owned. It has to be owned by all of us. It has to be owned by not just our cities and counties, but our utility districts and a lot of the levy districts. But in order to do that, it means everybody's got to chip in. I mean, there's some gaps in this map because things don't look that feasible, or maybe for some justification. But it's going to take quite a bit of work. And I will tell you, I think adopting in March is ambitious because it's going to take quite a bit of work to really get that last slide, as Victoria showed you, to the point where we really have a network that is truly connected, that truly provides access across all those performance measures. And I think some of those segments, I'm really intrigued by your idea. So I don't want to give you the yes or no right now, but I'm intrigued by your idea about looking at some of these, as I think I heard you articulate it, looking at some of these segments, using some data and some performance metrics. And I know that Victoria is already planning in the first half of next year to really think about some prioritization of some corridors based on some measures. So I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think this is a really important project. I think it shows the complexity, the challenge of being regional, but that should not deter us. That should not stand in our way. We just really want this to be owned across the region and from the bottom up, and that's going to take a little bit more work.
James, if I could jump in, Vice Chair Sander, I appreciate your point, and it's a good one. I got to say, I guess my understanding was SACOG is absolutely the organization that should lead this effort with the input, and being informed by all of our jurisdictions, right? So that's, as I understand, that's the process that's occurring in this first iteration. To your example specifically, I would envision that working out by, either Rancho Cordova or, the other jurisdiction that I forget which one you were saying, recognizes the need for that connection and would therefore then propose it in the plan that would then be vetted with SACOG staff in both those jurisdictions. I can speak to, down in Elk Grove, there's a couple of different connections we're looking to connect to Sacramento. I see an easier way to connect, which would be, along I-5 on the east side of it, and going up that way and connecting to the north. So, I've asked staff to reach out, and I've mentioned it to Victoria earlier today. And so, that's what I'm doing to try to, inform this plan. And I don't know how it will marry up with the metrics, but in terms of, the vision of connecting to the region to the north, and then, the greater SACOG region, when we compile this together, I'm looking at it as it's all of our respective responsibilities to identify those areas where we can connect. And that's how I think we can build this plan, together, and have one that meets the metrics, and it can be a great amenity for the region. So I see a couple of hands up here. I think I saw Director Saylors first, and then we'll go to Director Ledesma, and then we're going to go to the public because I see a hand up.
Chris has his hand first.
Oh, Chris. Okay, sorry, Chris. Go ahead, Director Ledesma. Go ahead.
Thank you. It'll just be brief, and thank you, Chair. I think my comments echo yours a little bit in terms of the role of SACOG and who is watching. I think this is a great kind of step towards keeping an eye on the ball, or planning out, actually putting the pieces together and showing what the puzzle will look like, right? So we all can, how we look forward in 10, 20 years, whatever it is, how this is all supposed to connect. I mean, I think Board Member Saylor's probably going to comment. We're having like a little bit of this discussion now having to do with bike ped connections between Yellow County with given some of our projects. But I think about it in terms of, how, our experience in working with some of these connections already with Sacramento even. And I think SACOG's role is to sort of put this out there, but also to support it as they have with us. I think it's an important role in keeping a connection and helping to educate and trying to find the right word, but facilitate the discussions necessary that point to a greater cause and why we're doing things. And I'll point out why is there a focus on the I Street Bridge connection, which is some project that West Sacramento and Sacramento have been working on for some time. What do we do with the upper deck of the I Street Bridge when the new bridge comes up? Well, it's all about connectivity, bike ped, keeping a connected piece of infrastructure between our two cities across the river there. And it helps when you have an honest broker in between. You can bring the data and the necessary wherewithal to educate others as we, councils will always kind of change and priorities may shift from time to time. But having, like I said, a map of this kind of trails of where we go, where we're trying to go on our riverfront, and bringing that piece of infrastructure to bear is hugely important because it lands right in the kind of community we're talking about serving. And some may view it as non-essential because of it's not a traditional piece of infrastructure if it's planned out the way it is, that is converting a deck. But it very much is in our world, as most of our folks go to Sacramento for either entertainment or for work. And the same could be said for Rancho Cordova. What SACOG has played that role already with us as we think about just transit in general and how we connect. We're trying to connect onto light rail, which will pass right through Rancho Cordova if we're able to be successful and connect. So again, those are kind of things that I think that it is a hugely important role that SACOG. I agree with you, Mr. Sander, about who helps us keep an eye on it. But it is, at the end of the day, it's we have to work with our colleagues across the river or any other jurisdiction. And I think SACOG is their role, but really is to help facilitate those discussions and bring the information together. So just wanted to add that. I think that's a really good discussion point.
Yeah, thank you. Director Saylor?
I think the timing of this plan is really amazing. It shows the great foresight that we have had over the years, that in anticipation of the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Job Act, we already anticipated that it would be important for us to have a Trails Master Plan for the region. I think the good stuff that we can do together we can't do by ourselves. And so David's observation of that example is right on target. It takes more than one entity to make these trails work. I think the webinar that we had on Tuesday really highlighted the importance of bringing project proposals to get forward that are comprehensive, that they don't just stop at a county line or a river or a causeway. They go all the way and connect multiple jurisdictions. An example for us in YOLO is connecting Davis and Woodland with an off-road bike path. And that's a project we've had in mind for years and years. It involves a railroad, a lot of private landowners, 2 cities, a county, and it's going to take all of us to make it happen. Trying to increase access and mobility across the YOLO bypass is another one that is on the radar for a lot of us. Going from West Sacramento to Clarksburg involves a lot of people and a lot of agencies, and this plan gives us kind of a framework, a blueprint for parts of our mobility infrastructure that we haven't had a chance to focus on previously, and it comes at an excellent time. I'm a bullish on this, and I think it's really resonated with the community members in YOLO County who have worked in trails for decades and now see that we're finding ways to connect them. So I think this is, and I think I agree with David's observation of the significance of the interagency work and Chris's suggestion that SACOG has an ongoing role to play here.
Thank you, Director Saylor. Yeah, and if this moves forward to the public release, I'm sure our constituents will have some good input as well and might identify other points of connection for this plan. I want to go out to the public now and just want to see if there's any comments from the public. And I do see a hand up. Familiar name, Kevin Busey. Good to see you, Kevin, or hear you anyway. If you want to go ahead and unmute.
Thanks, Council Member Darren. Hey, Kevin Busey. I just want County of Sacramento. It's been a pretty collaborative process with SACOG working with Victoria. The county's been in the middle of updating its active transportation plan. And so we've been trying to align our active transportation plan with Victoria's effort. Like I said, it's been very collaborative. It's been a good process. As it relates to Director Sanders' comments on the American River Parkway access, I think Victoria and I have talked about that, and she may talk about that a little bit later. But as far as the county's active transportation plan, we are looking at putting in a recommendation to look at how we improve access to the American River Parkway as a potential separate study, but recommended out of our active transportation plan, because we realize that it's an important regional connection that we need to have as much access to as possible. So unfortunately, the outreach for our plan didn't include a separate crossing, so it was hard for us to include that crossing. I think that Director Sanders is speaking to. So essentially put that recommendation to look at access in the future. And that's all I had. Thank you. Chair Sanders. Chair Susan.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other comments from the public on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'm bringing it back to our committee members. Any further discussion? Or if not, I'll entertain a motion. I'll go ahead and move this item,
Second.
and seconded by Director Saylor. A roll call vote, please, Jessica.
Director Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Aye.
Desmond, absent. Ledesma for Guerrero,
Aye.
Jennings, absent. Joyner.
Aye.
Joyner, could you repeat that?
Aye.
Thank you. Saylor,
Aye.
Chenier, absent. Vice Chair Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Spokely,
Aye.
and did I get Vice Chair Spokely's vote?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sorry. And
problem.
Chair Soon,
Aye,
thank you, motion carries.
great. Thank you very much. That'll conclude our action items, and we'll move on to informational items. Item 7, this is the tentative programs for the 2022-2023 SACOG funding round. And Chris Doherty, good morning.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Chris Doherty with the Transportation Group here at SACOG. Give me a second to share my screen, and there we go. Can you all see the PowerPoint okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So the item before you today is an update on the programs that we are recommending to take forward for the funding round that we are expecting to launch these over the next calendar year. Over the past 15 years, SACOG's funding round has been an important source of funding for the region's transportation investments. These competitive projects fund road, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian projects throughout the 4-county region. As we move into the next funding cycle, we aim to build on the successes of the last funding round while bringing the program into alignment with new state and federal policies. Because of the robust engagement effort and the success of the last funding round, staff is recommending to keep the same framework that this board adopted for the last funding round. To bring these programs into an alignment with new state and federal policies, we would amend guidelines to align with the state's Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, or CAPTI program, as well as both state and federal new policies on equity, and of course with SACOG's ongoing efforts to address equity. All the programs that we have in front of you today are designed to sorry, I lost my screen for a second, are designed to advance regional goals and implement the MTP SCS. So for the programs, we are, the first program we would like to kick off is the Rotating Match Fund. This program was conceived in the existing framework, but had not been implemented. The goal of this program is to use a strategic percentage of the funding estimate to support local match and leveraging requirements for state and federal competitive programs. With the signing of the new federal transportation bill, the IIJA, a large percentage of the increase in transportation funding that will be coming through will be through competitive programs and less on formulaic programs. So this program will be an important strategic resource for our local partners as these new programs are launched at the federal level. So we're looking forward to launching this earlier in the next calendar year. The Innovative Mobility Program is one you should be familiar with. This program funds a broad range of activities through to advance TDM, telework initiatives, and Civic Lab. This program has funded several innovative pilot programs and projects throughout the region. We are currently discussing internally how to use this program to also meet the needs of a post-pandemic recovery, while also supporting the current initiatives. So we expect to be bringing this program with a new framework back to this board over the next calendar year to address these. The the Empower, Engage, and Implement program, or EEI as we call it internally. This program was formerly the Disadvantaged Communities Pipeline Projects Program. We are expecting that to be launched this year. This will be headed up by Rosie Ramos, so you'll be hearing from later on another item. The framework will establish a planning process and funding stream approach that meets the needs of the region's BIPOC and low-income communities. And that framework creation is expected to begin in spring and will identify how best to identify the funding streams for that moving forward. To move on to our regional core programs, as noted, we are recommending to use the existing framework that we used for this funding round. That framework created 2 programs that nest under the regional program, the Maintenance and Modernization Program and Transformative Programs, as well as carrying forward the Community Design Program. The Maintenance and Modernization Program is really designed for cost-effective, non-expansion projects that are less than $5 million in cost. This is commonly used for state of good repair projects or projects that are easier to implement. The Transformative Program is really designed for all system expansion projects, road expansion projects, and projects that are larger than $5 million that create significant regional benefits. And lastly, the Community Design Program, which is a mainstay SACOG program that supports placemaking and improves livability in the community, implements blueprint ideals, and supports the MTP SCS. Recent additions to this program include alignment with Green Means Go and supporting green zones. So we are expecting to be rolling these programs out in a staggered approach over the next calendar year. We're going to start that process by determining our funding estimate very early in 2022. Each of these programs and that fund estimate will require significant input from the SACOG board, as well as engagement for all of your staff. This will be the first of many discussions we'll be having about funding over the next year. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions from the directors? Director Saylor.
Thank you, Darren. Chris, my question is about this. What I think you're saying is there'll be multiple targets or multiple processes over the course of the year. That slide that you just had up showed the
Yes.
fund estimate, and then different rounds or different opportunities for people to come forward with project ideas. Do you have any more specificity on that? Like when and which pieces when?
So we are working through that timeline now. What we're doing as staff is comparing that with the other programs. Next year is going to be a busy funding year with SB1 programs coming online and those big programs coming at the state level. There's also a big question mark about the new federal programs, and we don't have timelines on those yet. So we're trying to take our time to kind of really identify that timeline so that it doesn't, so that it's more, we can do this in a strategic fashion, but also not max out your grant writing staff and your local staff on those programs. So we want to position some of these programs like the rotating match fund in advance of those new competitive programs so that we're ready and well placed to be strategic for those new programs. Does that answer your question?
Well, yes, it does. On concept, what do you think the timeline for determining the timeline is?
I would expect we'd probably be coming back in maybe have a more defined timeline when we get to the funding estimate, which will be probably, we're aiming for February at this point.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
If I could just add in, sorry, if I could just add in really quickly, I think the other piece of the timeline that's important, and Chris kind of touched on this, is we really want to make sure that we're engaging with our partners as well, early and often. And find out timing constraints or what they're looking for as well, and be able to incorporate that in our process. We want to make sure we're having all the conversations that we need to have in order to make this successful for the region. So just a little important thing to add there.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Christina. I have a question, either Chris or Christina, in terms of timing. So specifically to the Empower, Engage, and Implement program, is that also with the equity mindset as well? Okay.
Yes.
And so the reason why I was asking was Vice Chair Jennings, we have the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and the last go around, we had a conversation about just being a little bit more, adding some specificity to some of the groups that we're targeting, specifically Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Latino communities. And that resolution and the work of that committee I think we're very close to getting something. And I was wondering what the opportunity is to basically make sure we're consistent. This program is consistent with that resolution and the work that that committee is doing.
So not to speak out of turn, as Rosie from our staff is running that program, but the tentative timeline that we have discussed so far is that guideline discussion starting about March and wrapping up maybe in October, so that we'll have a good long discussion about how to assemble that framework. And I'm happy to hand it over to Rosie if she wants to add to that, and she popped up.
Or I can just really quickly, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to align the work that is going to come out of the Race Equity and Inclusion Group. As Chris mentioned, the work to identify this framework is going to start early next year. And so that framework is that open window to identify the communities and work with our jurisdictions to make sure that it is in line with the work that we're doing overall, and also meeting the needs of our communities as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rosie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the directors? This is an informational item, and we look forward to hearing more. Thank you very much.
Great.
Okay, let's move on to item 8, the launching of the 2023 Active Transportation Program Guideline and Application Development. Victoria, you're up again.
I am up again. Thank you for inviting me, not once, but twice, to share information with you. And I have a presentation to put on the screen. Thank you. So this is a preview of what is going on with the 2023 Active Transportation Program. In spite of having a name that implies it is far off, it is already in progress. And I'm here to flag some of those pieces for you today. A quick recap: Active Transportation Program funds projects that will increase biking and walking. This is through infrastructure projects, non-infrastructure programs such as Safe Routes to School programs, plans, although I will put an imaginary asterisk by there. It is very difficult to get a plan funded through the Active Transportation Program. You will have better luck with Caltrans planning grants. And then it'll also fund project development only for projects that are very large. If your project is less than $7.5 million total cost, you need to have it funding or ask for it to fund through construction. ATP is a very unique funding source where there's a tiered competition. You first compete in a statewide competition, and then if you are unsuccessful in the state, you are referred to regional programs like SACOG's 6-county regional active transportation program. This is, while it involves some complicated setup on the back end of the process, it does offer opportunities for streamlined applications where you're able to use most of the information that you submitted in your state application then to compete at the regional level. They are currently discussing what possible changes are for the 2023 Active Transportation Program. There are some parts where they are looking to clarify some parts that have been confusing in past rounds, such as how leveraging funds can count towards your project. They are also looking to keep their quick build pilot program, but with some additional clarifications on what exactly is a quick build project. There was some confusion between what is quick build versus what is tactical urbanism last time, where, and also some people who thought that small infrastructure projects could be counted as quick build pilot programs. So throughout the state, there was a lot of confusion on that. California Transportation Commission staff is looking to clear that up. They are also proposing an introduction of pro-housing designations into the application. There's a lot of discussion throughout the state. Pro-housing designation is a new concept throughout, or a new program throughout the state to look at local agencies that are making steps to address the housing shortage throughout the state. At this point in time, no one in the SACOG region has the pro-housing designation, though one agency, City of Sacramento, is in the application process and is likely to receive theirs. But for all others, this is a big question mark of how this additional step fits into the already somewhat labor-intensive application. They are also looking to possibly change the project size designations. This comes into play because, as I mentioned a minute ago, if you are a large infrastructure project, you could apply for your project development. So your environmental, your design, your right-of-way, and not be expected to include a construction ask in that as well. They were looking to raise the threshold for large infrastructure projects to 10 million. So only projects that are 10 million in project cost or more expensive would have the option to ask for project development only. This would impact probably a couple of different projects in our region, but it's still not exactly clear since many agencies are still figuring out what they are looking to put forward. Those are some of the most notable changes that California Transportation Commission staff is presenting as part of the discussion for this round. There is a longer list that they are tackling through additional workshops. And here I have 4 definite workshops listed and then a tentative one listed on February 23rd. Since I developed this slide deck, it is looking more and more likely that that February 23rd is most definitely going to be used. And so if you can create an imaginary strike through on optional, just know that that is another instance in which your staff would be able to attend these CTC-led workshops and provide their input on the guideline development, the application and scoring rubrics, and learn about what is coming up for the next state ATP. A quick overview of what the draft state ATP schedule is looking like. They will have a call for projects next March. They will announce awards in October, and they will approve the awards in December. And that then identifies which projects were unsuccessful in the state that would be able to compete in the regional ATP. Our calendar is still under development. We are figuring out exactly where the state schedule is going to land first, but based on the tentative deadlines they have set for us in the materials available so far, you could expect that the Transportation Committee would be looking at a final regional active transportation policy framework in April of next year. So that will be the next big action that's coming up, and we will work with El Dorado County Transportation Commission and Placer County Transportation Planning Agency on all of the different parts of this calendar, and then also the policy framework development itself and the application. And I wanted to highlight these still available state provided active or technical assistance opportunities. CTC staff, or California Transportation Commission staff, is offering virtual site visits for any project that is considering applying for this next round. Virtual site visits are new to the pandemic. They used to offer in-person site visits and on a more limited ability. but now they're able to fit in a number of more virtual offerings, and these will be available through February 2022. I would encourage anybody who is thinking of applying to the state active transportation program next year to do that sooner rather than later. So you would have the ability to implement any recommendations from CTC staff, or pursue their recommendations for engaging with the community. There's also a more limited technical assistance program that people can apply for disadvantaged communities. This is through the Active Transportation Resource Center. They will select 10 or more recipients throughout the state, and that deadline is fast approaching. But if you're one of the estimated 10 recipients throughout the state, you will receive application assistance. They will do actual site visits with you, so going to your community and checking out the area where you're looking for your improvements, and also do a lot of work to help build capacity among your local staff to help advance not only this project, but other projects like it that are going to provide the biking, walking, and rolling improvements that your community needs. And with that, that is the end of my update, but I will take any questions.
Thank you, Victoria. Any questions for Victoria from our committee members? Okay, seeing none, I want to go out to the public for if anyone had any questions or comments for this item. I don't see any. I don't see any out in the public either. Okay, I'll bring it back. This is again an informational. Thank you very much, Victoria. We'll move on to the next item. Item 9, the federal statewide transportation improvement program corrective action. Eric Johnson, good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So this is an informational item we wanted to bring to your attention. The federal government, through the Federal Highways Administration and Federal Transit Administration, has an oversight role of MPOs, which, as SACOG is the federally designated MPO for the 6-county region, as well as the state of California. And in the review of the state of California's FSTIP, which is different than what you heard about from Jose Luis earlier, the Federal Highway Administration flagged 2 issues of concern to them. The first is that their belief that the money, how it is suballocated to regions in the state below the MPO level, is not consistent with federal guidance. And then secondly, that the selection of projects should not be selected within a metropolitan region below the MPO level. And so this has created a problem for MPOs around the state, including SACOG. Of course, there's a very complicated history of how regions deal with transportation funding. Here in the Sacramento region, we have our partners in Placer and El Dorado counties. In the Bay Area and the SCAG region, they have similar but very different relationships with sub-regional transportation agencies that go back to the 1990s or earlier. And so while the ask through this corrective action is that the federal government is asking that these processes be changed, it does present a challenge to existing practices and potentially funding in the region, in our region and other regions. So the current state of where things are at with this. First, SACOG and PCTP and EDCTC have asked Caltrans to request an extension from the federal government so that this doesn't impact things unnecessarily and unintended, because this has been the current practice for over 30 years, both in the Sacramento region and elsewhere in the state. And then secondly, we are working with PCTP and EDCTC to clarify with Caltrans and the federal government exactly what the practices are here and how we feel that the long-standing practices that we have worked well and served our region well. And there's similar efforts being undertaken in the MTC and SCAG regions. So it's a rather complicated issue, but we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of this today. Happy to answer any questions. Also, James, if there's anything else you wanted to add, this is something we've been working on very closely with our partners here.
Thanks, Eric. Just a quick question is for either you or Sue. Is Caltrans weighing in or helping to advocate for position here?
I won't speak for Sue, but this specifically has been issued to the Federal Programming Division at Caltrans. And so we've had meetings with Caltrans. We are still waiting on a response from Caltrans to our request for an extension. We're also waiting on a response from Caltrans for a copy of a letter that they're supposed to be sending to the federal government in response to the corrective action. So again, while the corrective action was filed against Caltrans, it does have a very real impact on us as an MPO, as well as our partners in El Dorado and Placer counties.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Stay tuned, I guess. Director Joyner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to take a moment and on behalf of PCTPA and all of the communities in South Placer, thanks SACOG, James and Eric and staff for working with us on this and focusing the attention on this that is necessary. We're working towards that extension. We very much appreciate the cooperation in that. This is a heavy lift and a little scary for those of us in Placer County and El Dorado County, so we appreciate the help.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead. I see a hand up in the public. Go out to the public. Nikisha Barthel. Okay, go ahead and unmute and if you have a comment. Nikisha Barthel, did you have a comment? Okay, I see your hand up, Nikisha. If you're wanting to speak, I don't.
Sorry, Darsoon. Hold on one moment while we promote her.
And then Sue will come back to you.
Nikisha,
Oh, did we lose her?
I think she's with us now. Nikisha,
Oh, okay.
can you unmute yourself? Nikisha, there should be a microphone icon for you to click to unmute yourself.
Why don't we go ahead to back to Sue? Nikisha, we'll come back to you in a minute if you're trying to work on that. Sue, go ahead. Did you have your hand up?
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
It was difficult trying to get in there and all my settings on my phone. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Nikisha and I am a community member. I've been in Sacramento my whole life. And I just have a question. I usually don't do these type of board meetings, so please excuse me if I'm a little nervous and you can hear it in my voice. Now, the guy who just presented what you all are talking about on the agenda, he said that the federal government does not agree with whatever you guys are wanting to do with the funding, and it needs to be, I guess, maybe in other communities. I need to hear more about that, because I'm probably one of those people in the other communities that they're referring to, and I just want to hear a little bit more about what he was talking about. Did they suggest any suggestions as far as how the money should be used in those communities?
So I'll try to address that. So the issue really is not whether the money moves out of the SACOG region. It's how the money is divided up within the SACOG region. So the 6 counties of El Dorado and Placer in particular are ones right now where they receive a population-based share of the funding. And the federal government's position is that that should be spread across the entire 6-county region. So it really isn't about shifting money from one community to another, but happy to talk offline if you have additional questions about the federal funding process for transportation.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, I would like to talk offline. How can I contact you?
There's a contact form on our sacog.org website, and you should be able to contact me directly there.
Okay, and what's your name?
Eric Johnson.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate your time today. Thank you, guys.
Very welcome.
Thanks for calling in, Nikisha.
Absolutely.
Okay, Sue, do we have you?
Yes, Chairman Sim, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to Eric's presentation that Caltrans is very supportive. We have elevated this to Dr. Tokusamashakin, and he is reviewing the material and will be providing a letter of support to further this matter as much as possible.
Great. Thank you for that. Appreciate that, Sue. Okay. And I see a hand up from Lynn Goldsmith. Can we go ahead and, oh, there you go. Thanks, Jessica.
You're welcome.
Lynn, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Got it.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Yes, I'm from the Sacramento community too, and I'm both a member of 350 SAC and ECOS. What I'd love to hear more about what Eric is talking about, because I moved from a different region, so I sort of understood things differently than I've understood what's going on here in SACOG. Is there, can you spend a little bit, or am I just being redundant with everybody else? I'm sorry if I'm taking up time that should be.
Lynn, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Oh, I'd like to hear more about what the federal government is asking for and what is different between what SACOG does and other regions like SCAG.
Oh, okay. I'm going to ask if I can connect you with Eric offline.
Okay.
That conversation. That'd be all
Okay.
right.
It sounded like the previous question was on the same same idea, so that's why I thought maybe it'd be, a good question for now. But I'd be happy to talk to Eric offline.
Yeah, and I think that's what Eric's following up with Nikisha on as well.
Sure, and Mr. Chair, I could just offer as well that we are, as I mentioned, we are preparing a response to Caltrans about what we intend to propose that the relationship looks like between Placer and El Dorado counties. And I think that might shed some light on exactly how the funding is distributed in the region and what we're proposing moving forward. So we can bring that back to a future meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Is there something online that I could look at that would explain that whole system better of how you distribute the money?
Not that immediately comes to mind. So why don't I connect with you offline?
Okay.
You can contact me through the website as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay, seeing no other hands up from the public. Committee members, if you have no further questions, I'm going to go ahead and close out this item and we'll move to the next item. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move to the next item. Excuse me while I pull up my agenda here. Item 10, our draft growth forecast. Garrett Ballard-Rosa.
Thanks, Chair, and I'm very cognizant of time, so I'll give the truncated presentation and hope we can get to Rosie's item as well to close out. So this is a continuation from a conversation we were having last month. And again, the growth projections is one of the important early parts of our long-range transportation plan, the MTP-SES. And it's prepared out at least 20 years in the future. And it's a requirement of the plan, but it's also a building block of the plan. And what we talked about last time is sort of the process that we get to that. A couple of summary points, and then I'll probably just close for questions. One, it's what we put together for these draft projections are regional, so 6 county. And in 2022, we'll be working very closely with your staffs on how that just gets distributed amongst and within communities across the region. Second is these are draft projections. So we're using this time up through February to ask for input from any partners. It's gone out to a broad list of partners on this material put together. But then third, the sort of takeaway, and this is the continuation of the conversation last month, is the projections see a robust sort of growth rate for the Sacramento region, growing faster than the state and the nation. But as we talked about, it's also overlaid with some demographic headwinds that are exogenous to the region. What that means is the growth rate itself is a bit slower than in the prior series for the prior plan. So that's an important sort of finding or important part of these projections we want to make sure everyone was aware of. And it does have implications for our plan. in terms of how much growth that plan can contain. So not only at the end year of the plan, but also at the interim years. For example, 2035 is a very important interim year in our plan, especially for our sustainable community strategy. So your local AHA staff will be very interested in this work. It's gone out to all of them. We wanted to make sure that we had ample time to be able to discuss this with them. So it's gone out to them. If there's questions about the methodology, I'm more than happy to go through specifics, but I know we're also running short on time. So we'll come back again with a staff recommendation in early 2022, but we did want to actually come together with this month with showing you the actual numbers we put together from the work. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Garrett. Any questions for Garrett? Okay, seeing none. Any members from the public would like to address this item? Okay, seeing none there. Again, thank you very much, Garrett. Appreciate the condensed version there, but we got the picture. Still growing fast, but not as much as we thought we were before.
And Tristan, you're gonna, as Garrett said, you're gonna see that come back. And so I know we got really sort of squeeze the end of the meeting here, but you're going to see it come back and there'll be questions. Garrett's done a lot of great work. We talked to GSEC about this, but it is we're not the only region in California. We're going to see much slower growth rates. So please understand that's going to come back in the MTP SES and everything else.
Yeah. No, thanks, James. It absolutely has huge effects on that. And I mean, we just, finished our arena thing, but I'm sure a lot of us have questions on how those numbers get affected as well. So yeah, we'll look forward to hearing from you in early 2022. Okay, we'll move on to our next item, our last item, the Youth Leadership Academy, our 2022 cohort. Very excited to see this list here. Rosie Ramos, hi.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, Chair and everyone else. Today, really all the information you need is in your packet. So I'm here to answer any questions if you have them. But as you can see in the list, we have actually 41 students that we accepted for cohort 4. So that's really exciting. Another year of YLA, another year of really smart and students that are ready to take charge of their future. So as you can see the list there, we have 41 students that are brand new. We have 6 students that are returning, which is really exciting. We have 1 student, Tate Chatfield, that's been with us since year 1. She's returning again. We have 2 students from year 2, and then 3 students that are coming in from this just finished cohort. So they will be joining us as coordinators and helping us continue to evolve the program so it's infused with their ideas and making sure that it's for the students, by the students. And yeah, we're excited. We have pretty good representation. I think we've learned a lot in our outreach strategies, and hopefully next year we'll be able to get out to schools in person in some of the schools that we're just not seeing some traction. So hoping that next year we'll be able to get more students from Sutter and Yuba County, but we had great representation from El Dorado County, really bigger numbers in previous years. So it's really exciting to see that. And yeah, I want to encourage you all to participate in the program. I have a list already of folks that have already mentioned wanting to be involved as speakers. So if you haven't already reached out, please let me know. As we continue to develop the program, we'll be in touch. And the only other change is that instead of the 15th that's listed as a kickoff date, we're actually going to move that to January 22nd. But we actually have an orientation today to get students acquainted with the coordinators and have them ask us any questions that they might have. So yeah, we're excited to have another year. I think it's going to be a great year. We have a lot of opportunities with the work that we're doing at SACOG, and we hope to plug them in to a lot of the processes in the MTP and EEI and the Trails Network. So we're excited to see that connection. But yeah, I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Rosie. Appreciate your work on this. It's great that we're introducing the concept of regionalism at such an early age. Any questions for Rosie? Okay, I don't see any questions. Let me go out to the public here briefly. If any members of the public would like to speak or ask questions on this item?
No public comment.
Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back. Hey, again, thank you so much, Rosie. Just for the record, I asked to participate, but I want to make sure I'm on there.
You're on my list.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else, please do. It's a great opportunity to engage with these young folks. With that, I'm going to, excuse me, I think I got one more item here on our agenda. If there's any, excuse me, other matters, any folks for the good of the order from our committee members? Okay, seeing none, I hope you're able to join the lunchtime presentation on the blueprint. James, did you want to tee anything up before we sign off, or Christina? No? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time today. Have a good day.